Good morning, everyone. My name is Simon Hamilton. I'm the Chief Executive of Belfast Chamber, and you're all very welcome to this morning's event, which is the launch of the results of the latest Belfast Business Survey. Belfast Chamber is very pleased to work and partner with Belfast City Council on this, our third iteration of the Belfast Business Survey. And before we go to the actual results of the survey, I'm going to hand over to Kieran Higgins. Kieran is an Enterprise and Business Growth Officer at Belfast City Council. He's going to say a brief word of welcome and also set out why Belfast City Council is working with Belfast Chamber to continue to produce this survey. Kieran, over to you.
Thanks very much, Simon. Yeah, so my name is Kieran Higgins, Enterprise Business Growth Officer with the City Council. I'd just like to say, reciprocate what you said there, Simon. I'm very pleased to be working with yourself and the Chamber of Commerce and with MEL Research again on this is our third wave of our business sentiment survey. So this research, this kind of detailed and up-to-date research, is really important for us as a city council in terms of helping us to refine our direct business supports to local businesses, but also to inform our kind of wider policies and strategies that influence the economy in the city. And with that in mind, for example, we're developing a new economic strategy for the city, and there'll be details of that coming out for public consultation pretty soon. And there's also a refresh of the Belfast agenda happening at present, and there's public consultation and workshops on that happening. Just in terms of this survey, as Simon said there, this is our third wave. It's a longitudinal survey, so it's not just a one-off. I think that's just an important one to emphasize. It's every 6 months, so it gives us an opportunity to kind of look back and see what kind of trends are emerging and what kind of consistent issues are facing local businesses. I'd really like to thank everybody who is on the call or watching later who have completed the survey. I know it takes 12, 40 minutes. Everybody's very, very busy in that, but it's really, really appreciated. And I'd like to say thank you very much for completing it, and also to all the other various stakeholders and organizations who help kind of publicize the survey. And the last time we did this was February and March, and of course the world's changed significantly since then. So I'm very interested in finding out how our kind of local businesses have performed over the last 6 months, and what they're telling us is on their mind for the next 6 months. Thank you very much.
Kieran, thank you. We're now going to hand over to Kirsty Marshall. Kirsty is an Associate Director at MEL Research, and she's also joined by David Chong Ping, a Director at MEL. Kirsty, the floor is yours, and we're looking forward to the results of the latest survey. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I'll just share put this on presentation mode. Great, can you just nod that you can see the slides?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. So welcome, everyone. Just to reiterate what Kieran and Simon has said, it's lovely that you've all been able to join us. I'm just going to talk you through the results of the latest wave of the tracking research. So this wave, we were live between the 8th of August and 12th of September. So, not too long ago, quite up-to-date findings we've got that we're going to be covering here. I'm just going to talk through the people we talked to. So majority were micro businesses with 57%, 31% of small businesses, and 12% medium to large businesses. And with the trading markets, majority are trading in Belfast City, 81%. So broadly in line with what we've seen in previous waves of the research. With other parts of Northern Ireland, we had 57% trading in that market. Just on the right of this slide, just showing which sectors we talked to, so we weight to this. So this is the same every wave. So we've got kind of 19% of professional, scientific and technical businesses, and this is in line with what type of businesses operate in Belfast. Okay. In this wave, we talked to 406 businesses. Okay, so just moving on to the next slide. So this is a slide showing sales turnover change in the past 6 months. So this is what businesses are reporting to have experienced in those previous 6 months. And what we see is kind of a broadly stable picture in Belfast, Northern Ireland and other areas of the UK. It's slightly decreased, but not to a significant amount of those reporting that the sales turnover has increased in the past 6 months. And we do see a decrease in people reporting that it's decreased, should have said decline, that it's decreased there. When we look at businesses trading in Ireland, we do see a little bit of a decline in those reporting an increase in sales turnover, but they've moved into the staying the same box, not those reporting a decrease. So they've not kind of totally shifted down the scale there. In the other EU markets, this it's broadly stable. It's not changed too much from the way we did 6 months prior. Other overseas market, this one changes a little bit more because we do have less businesses trading in other overseas markets, but they've reported an increase in sales turnover in the past 6 months, with almost 6 in 10 reporting that who trade in these overseas markets, and only 9% reporting a decrease in the past 6 months. So this has really kind of changed a bit, looking a lot more positive for those trading in these markets there. And just looking at some of the other reports that have been out, so Danske Bank have also kind of reported that in some research they've done that the first quarter of 2022 estimated the economy has grown, but they said the pace of economic growth is likely to show from the second quarter of the year onwards. And that kind of leads us into the next slide, where we look at sales turnover change in the next 6 months, where we see quite a stark difference in optimism of the businesses. So in Belfast, in Ireland, in businesses trading in other EU markets, we see it drop quite a lot, that kind of optimism for the coming 6 months. The results of, it was looking at Belfast in particular, 34% in this wave expect their turnover change to improve in the next 6 months, and that's down 26% on 6 months ago. So that's really declined. It's a very stark decrease there. So, even though they've had quite a similar or slightly down previous 6 months, they're not expecting that to stay the same in the coming 6 months. And this is where we start to see the impact of, the cost of living crisis, the war in Ukraine. People aren't wanting to spend as much, and this is really kind of feels like it's making local businesses in trading in Belfast and elsewhere like really worried about the next 6 months coming up, how this is going to impact their business. When we focus in overseas markets, that's not those trading in other overseas markets haven't seen the kind of decline, but it's expected to be a lot more volatile, with 51% expecting an increase, but 37% expecting a decrease. So they've almost gone to either end of the scale in that market. Okay, so just moving on to the next slide, where we've asked businesses to tell us how their profitability has changed in the past 6 months. And again, it's broadly in line when you look across all the different areas where people trade. Focusing in first on Belfast, that's slightly declined for those expecting who've had an increase in the past 6 months, and it's slightly increased for those expecting who've had a decrease. Looking at Ireland, it's slightly increased, but it's not too different from what we saw 6 months ago, with a few more saying their profitability's decreased in the past 6 months. In more positive picture in businesses trading in other EU markets and overseas markets, with the amount saying that they've had an increase in the past 6 months, going up to 42% in other EU markets, 61% in other overseas markets. So we've seen some quite strong increases there. But again, when we look for looking to the future, when we ask businesses about what they expect to happen to their profitability in the next 6 months, this is where we see the decreases again, with across all types of all the different trading markets, expecting this to decrease in the next 6 months a lot more than we've seen in previous waves. It's particularly stark in Belfast, with 50% of businesses trading in this market expecting this to decrease in the next 6 months. So we really are starting to feel that impact of, you know, the kind of the business climate out there at the moment, seeing this in the results there. Okay, so this next slide, we ask people about their economic prospects in the next 6 months for their own business, for their business sector, and for the Belfast city economy. And people are, again, we see that pessimism coming through here for what they're expecting to happen. So the most stark amount of people expecting this to get worse is for the Belfast city economy, with 71% of businesses expecting this to get worse in the next 6 months. For their own business, they're not having that same level of pessimism, but it has still increased by some way, with the business sector as well, slightly more than what they're expecting to happen to their own business. You see those levels almost, well, more than double versus the wave we did 6 months ago. So there's a real kind of feeling of worry almost that we're picking up in that kind of the next 6 months, coming up across quite a lot of different businesses we talk to. Okay, just moving on to the next slide. Starting to see some of the reasons why there is that pessimism that we've seen in the results. Like, almost all have seen their business costs increase for fuel and electricity, for wholesale prices and supplies, for raw materials, the movement of goods and services. They're all in the 80s or 90%. So that's pretty much all of the businesses we talk to expecting their costs to increase. However, the level of business debt is pretty much similar to what we saw last wave, with 64% of businesses expecting this to remain steady. And it's slightly, the amount of businesses saying that they expect this to increase is very slightly down on 6 months. So I think that level of business debt changed too much, but the costs that businesses are facing over the last 6 months have already increased, and they're probably going to increase even further in the next 6 months. Okay, so moving on to business challenges, what the main challenges businesses are facing. So this is where we see a difference in the last wave as well, where pandemic uncertainty was the highest recorded response. This has fallen from 42% to 16%. So there's not as much worry about the pandemic that we're picking up in this wave, with staff recruitment, paying overheads and getting paid on time being the kind of the main business challenges that the businesses are mentioning. There's more of an interest as well in employees' welfare and financial welfare, which is up to 24%, which was only at 10% last wave. So that's kind of seen an increase as well. And just looking at some of the other reports out over the same time period, the Open University Business Barometer also mentioned that long-standing skill shortages have been exacerbated by the pandemic and the impact of Brexit on the movement of people as well. So they're kind of also commenting and seeing that staff recruitment in their research is an issue as well for businesses. Okay, looking at the next slide on the impact of UK's EU exit on businesses. So this is a question we asked slightly differently this wave, so we haven't got any kind of comparisons to last wave, but the question we had on this last wave was broadly in line with the negative, those saying the negative answer, which was in the 30s as well. So it doesn't feel like this has changed too much. It hasn't really created opportunities for businesses, with only 6% agreeing to that option. It feels like most businesses aren't that sure what the impact's going to be yet, with 18% in the mixture of both opportunities and negative disruption, 30% saying it's had no impact on their business, and 13% saying it's too early to say so far. So it's majority kind of agreeing that it's not too negatively impacting their business, or they're not sure yet what that impact's going to be. So when we ask about the changes in staffing, so we saw that earlier on that staff recruitment was one of the main challenges that they're facing. But when we ask about whether they've had a change in staffing levels, they're expecting a change in the next 6 months, 72% of businesses are expecting it to remain broadly the same. So they're not expecting to hire loads more staff. They're not really expecting redundancies. They're expecting it to remain broadly the same. So it's not like they want to bring on loads and loads of new staff. Only 24% of businesses are expecting to hire more staff. It just feels like they're trying to find the right staff sometimes might be an issue. Which we also see on this next slide, where where businesses, when asked about what business advice or support needs they're going to have, 27% said recruiting, 22% said improving staff skills, and 18% said employee health and well-being. So it's really about getting the right people, improving their skills and making sure they're happy in the work they're doing. So it's really people focused, where businesses want support at the moment. And these levels have dropped a bit from what we saw last wave, but those are still kind of the top answers. So they really want to make sure the people that they do get are happy in their jobs, and they've got the skills they need to be able to do their jobs effectively. Okay, just moving on to the next slide, where we asked what are the barriers to growth for their business. 50% said the levels of demand and or sales are the main barriers to growth, and that's remained consistently the highest answer in all the ways we've done so far. But we see again the availability of other suitable staff and professional staff, the second and third answer. So again, that kind of need for the right people to join or to skill their current kind of staff are the barriers to growth that businesses are seeing. So this is kind of the staff answers coming across in a few of the different questions we ask. So just moving slightly away from what we've been talking about, we also asked about business alterations and location. Whether businesses have had difficulties finding suitable business premises in Belfast. So said they've not had any issues with the main, but of those that have had a difficulty here, business rates was the answer given most, with rent the second answer, and the lack of suitable premises at 18%. So it's just making sure that they can find the right premises, it's not too expensive, and the business rates are okay as well. So it's kind of those three factors together there. Okay. So moving on to if businesses have had any neighbourhood issues. So this question we ask on a scale, so they can select if they've got had a major issue, a minor issue, or not an issue, with the following kind of list of things. So what we see that across kind of the board here, that majority of things have increased. So more businesses are having problems with street cleanliness, antisocial behaviour has also increased as well. So we see particularly more having a major issue with street cleanliness. That's gone up 16% from last wave in that blue bar there. Car parking's remained broadly in line with last wave. It's like 3% less have had an issue with this one there. Condition of buildings in the area, this has increased as well, with 47 of businesses now having an issue with the condition of the buildings. Damage to property and street lighting have both increased 5 percentage points since last wave for impacting businesses there. Public transport availability, that's not as much of an issue this wave. That's gone down 6 percentage points, with 29% saying they had a major or minor issue in this wave of the research versus 35% earlier on in the year in February, March. And those reporting other problems slightly up at 22%, but that's not changed as much as what we've seen elsewhere. Okay. So we added a few new questions this wave on innovation and innovation activity, whether businesses had made any changes in the past months to what they're trying to innovate and what they're trying to change within their business. So over half of organisations haven't made any major changes on their innovation kind of organisational structures or practices. 30% have made a new or significant improved form of within their organisation, and 28% introduced a new or significantly improved product. When we asked likelihood of making a major innovative change in the next 6 months, there's 34% who said this is likely to happen, 29% kind of in that middle box, the neutral, they're not too sure, and 36% saying it's unlikely. So it's quite similar between those expecting to do a change and those not expecting to do an innovation change there. So when we look at impact on innovation activity and interest in collaboration, most of the people who answered here didn't answer one, because a lot of them are over that 50% mark. So 64% mentioned that excessive perceived economic risks have had an impact on their likelihood to do some sort of innovation within their business. Issues related to COVID, even though it wasn't mentioned higher up as much, it is kind of feeding into an impact of why they've decided not to do a certain innovation activity or do as much as they were planning. Lack of qualified personnel, again, that impact of staff and getting the right staff in has had an impact on their innovation activity. Finance, surprisingly a little bit further down the list there, like just not having the money to be able to do it is one of the barriers there. And regulations as well is mentioned quite prominently there. So just feel like there's a mix of factors that do impact on innovation activities. They're not just selecting one answer. There's quite a lot of different things that are coming up at a similar level there and reasons why they're not innovating. We also asked a question about interest in working collaboratively with other businesses, universities, or large bodies on research and development. And there is quite a lot of interest there, 23% very interested, 39% fairly interested. So, there is that appetite to work with others to help improve innovation within their business. Okay, so just moving on to kind of the summary of the key findings. So just really wanting to reiterate that although in the past 6 months, things have stayed relatively consistent versus what we saw in February, March, the outlook for the next 6 months is more pessimistic, with considerably less businesses believing that their sales turnover will increase in the next 6 months across all markets. So profitability has improved in other EU markets and other overseas markets, but like for turnover, those that expect profitability to increase has fallen considerably across markets compared to earlier in the year, with more pessimism also seen for economic prospects for their business, their sector, and the Belfast city economy this wave. All the business related costs, like we saw 99% of fuel or electricity have increased this wave. So it's really having an impact on business, those increasing costs just to run. The pandemic uncertainty is no longer the main challenge businesses face, but the staff recruitment now the most cited challenge. Recruiting and improving staff skills, the two main areas mentioned that businesses want more support on as well, and availability of staff were in the top 3 barriers to growth. Over half of organisations haven't made any major changes in the area of organisation structure or practices, products, processes, innovation projects or internal activities. So that's that question about whether they're wanting to innovate or if they've made any innovation changes. And over half haven't. 34% are likely to make an innovative change in the next 12 months, with 29% expressing a neutral view. So there is that appetite to innovate. It's just there are some of those barriers we just mentioned. Okay, so they're the slides we had to talk to, but we'll welcome any questions that anyone has, or if we want to go through anything else in more detail, we can go back to the slides.
Kirsty, thank you very much for that. That's very interesting. And as Kirsty has mentioned, that we have a bit of time available for some questions if anyone has some. There's some already come in, and we'll get to those in a second. But I think it does appear that, and that's the benefit of having of these surveys now under our belt, that whilst there was strong trading, there's a strong profitability in the last 6 months, but there has been it would appear that generally speaking, and that's not uniform, but generally speaking, there is a ratcheting up in concerns amongst the businesses who were surveyed about what the next 6 months might hold. I think that the most stark example of that was a slide around economic prospects, where there was a doubling of people's concerns. And is that a fair summary of what you've seen? And is that something that when you were getting the data back and you were looking at it, just that extent of growth and concern from quite small levels, and bearing in mind though businesses were being surveyed 6 months ago coming off the back of a pandemic, which was very, very difficult, and there has been that huge increase in concerns about what the next 6 months are going to hold and how that's going to affect their performance. Were you shocked at just how and from your experience of doing surveys like this, is that that must be almost unique in terms of the acceleration of concern over such a short period of time?
I think that's true. So if you look at this as a tracker survey, the previous wave, we looked at sentiment for the coming 6 months, which we've just reported, and people were generally buoyant in what's happened in the past 6 months. What we're seeing is people's views now, with all of these external factors that are outside of their control, coming in and adding to the challenges that businesses are facing on the back of the pandemic. So it's the uncertainty that continues. We had an uncertain period with the pandemic. We're now having a range of uncertain business trading environments brought about by lots of other things, including the cost of living, these increasing costs, where without some clarity, and we won't get into where that comes from, but without some clarity, how do you plan? And that's where this innovation questions and some of these things about staffing are starting to come through as well, is how can you plan for things when you don't really know what's around the corner? And the picture in all the media and what you see is bleak. But businesses are resilient, and that was shown in some of the other data. So I think there is a less optimistic picture for the next 6 months, but the next wave will obviously show whether or not that does come through in sales and in trading, etc. The question and the trade for sectors or partner countries that Connor has asked, I'll just pick up on that one too, if that's okay. The data is really too small. We've only around 50, just under 50 businesses that are using international trade or trading in international markets. Nevertheless, it may be that they're diversifying, and that's my view, not necessarily coming through in the data because there's a small number, but clearly those markets are helping prop up where their local trading markets aren't doing as well. And so that may be areas of support that other businesses who want to get into international trade may want to look at as well. So those are areas. It's a positive picture, but it's a small sample, so it's too difficult to really unpick that with those. But in terms of that sample, sort of 23% of those who are doing international trade outside of the Republic or Europe, and another 20% are in information and communication. So there's some sectors in there, but the numbers are small, therefore we can't really make too many inferences from it. It
is interesting. I think I thought it was a good question from Connor, and that, when you look at even when you were looking at the sort of forward feelings and views around trading and profitability, there was still a degree of optimism about other, the rest of the world market. And you're right, it might be very, very small, it might be limited number of sectors, but it's interesting that, looking at the local market, all of the data sort of suggests that looking at the local market or the wider UK market, it's hugely pessimistic. And, I'm not sure I would like to ask the same questions this morning, even, never mind when we did and see the results of that. So there is a cloud hanging over the UK economy, particularly at the minute. We'll see how that actually works out over the next group. But and whilst what's happening is global to some extent, there does seem to be some opportunities elsewhere, and obviously that won't suit all of the businesses who responded to this survey in terms of where they operate in and what they do. But it was an interesting glimmer of hope in an otherwise quite gloomy picture. And there's a bit of time for some other questions, but if you can get those in, we can get those asked to Kirsty and to David. But if I could maybe pick up on the business costs again, there was a pretty unsurprising result in some ways, but again, it's the starkness of the right across the board. Everybody has seen their costs go up. I would like to have a chat with the 1% of people who reported that their fuel and electricity didn't go up, and see where they're getting that provided from. But there is a again, that is a hugely sort of pessimistic picture painted by those numbers, that it's just right across the board in virtually every cost. Every cost line there is gone up, and everybody is reporting it. That again is almost unique, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So and in terms of the staffing issue, were you surprised that had come through quite strongly? Because I noted that in terms of seeking business support, all of the top three answers were staff related. When it came to business challenges as well, staff recruitment was coming through quite strongly. We're given the issues around costs, we be surprised that staff were staffing and skills related issues were still quite high up there.
I think the key bit with staff is that in order to really improve your business and actually take it forward, you need the right people at the right time, and that's what's come through on previous waves as well, and it continues to come through as a challenge, but also an opportunity. So if you can find the right staff to do the work that these businesses have, that will help improve the prospects of that business. Obviously the challenge is with the cost of living aspect of it, pay rises, and living wages, all of those sort of things start to impact. So it's going to be an ongoing challenge, I think, for businesses to make sure that they are attractive to staff by providing benefits packages, etc., that will attract the right caliber of staff in the first place. And that's combined with all of the other rising costs that they've got as well. So it's about how do you balance all of that, because there is going to be a smaller pool of, or a pool of people and competitors that they may well go to. So how do businesses make it attractive enough for a business, for a potential member of staff to come and join their organisation rather than another?
Thank you. I think so. There's a few questions in as well. One from Roshi McCoskey. What did the panel think provide some immediate relief for businesses in terms of support, and should that come from council or from the assembly or from the government? In terms of, maybe not one that you, David or Kirsty, could answer directly, but in terms of, what was coming through strongly in terms of where support was required, maybe it was around skills, cost of doing business, and that's something that we in Belfast Chamber have been talking to various people in government about, getting support to businesses now to get them through the difficulties that they're experiencing. But David, is that the areas that was coming through strong, sort of skills, people, cost of doing business?
It was, and there is the trend there from the previous waves that we've done that continue to show the same. It is about having the right people with the right skill set to take the business forwards. And I think that's shown in other surveys, not just our own survey, but other data that we have as well. Skills is an ongoing challenge for business generally. So yes, continued focus on trying to find the right people with the right skill set, or trained up to the right skill set.
Thank you. And then maybe just a final question there. Conor O'Hara has asked another question there about any indications that businesses are running down reserves to cope with higher day-to-day running costs. I'm not sure that, I don't think the presentation touched on it, but there was a question around debt. I think that wasn't actually increasing. That had sort of pandemic fears of running up a lot of debt had not shown up in the data. I think that's right, isn't it? Was there any other data to suggest that there was a running down of reserves or the money available to businesses?
Yeah, I mean, just backing that up with the data there. So those saying that their level of business debts remains steady is at 64%, and that's up slightly from 6 months. So it's 60% in the wave 6 months ago, and 4% decrease saying it's increased. That's a confusing way of saying it. So it's 23% now, and it was 27. So it does feel like, then people aren't really wanting to take on more debt. They're wanting to, like you said, it does feel like they're just trying to steady the ship almost.
And again, it leads to that uncertainty aspect, and we see it with innovation and adaptations and things. People are cautious at the moment to retain their cash flow. Cash is king at the end of the day. So actually, that will feed into whether or not businesses feel confident enough in order to invest in it or take on more debt as a result of that. And I think that again is showing in the data.
And it is only anecdotal and therefore not scientific in any way. I think it is. I always find it. I think in our conversations with members, I find that some are in exactly that position where they are just trying to sort of almost batten down the hatches and get through this period, and it's quite difficult testing for them. And then on the other hand, back to that point around resilience, there are others who are even in sectors which are experiencing difficulties and the sharp end of rising costs. They are innovating, they are opening new businesses, they're doing new things, and that's their answer and their response to try to get through a challenging period. That is often the case. So again, thank you, David and Kirsty, again for not just your presentation today, but your ongoing work in making the Belfast Business Survey possible. I think that perhaps we've started everybody on a Wednesday morning, maybe not with the happiest of outlooks about the economy. I think it does sort of accurately reflect where things are, and it does appear that the challenge of the pandemic has receded, but it has been replaced by a whole host of new challenges, and whether that's the cost of doing business, whether that's the availability of suitable staff, or even sort of very localized issues around the cleanliness or the safety of the city as a place to do business in. And there are a whole raft of new challenges, but there has been no respite after the pandemic. There has been a whole set of other challenges, and so whilst we don't look forward to enduring all of those, we are going to look forward to the next set of results in the survey, just to see what that actually means in terms of business sentiment and how businesses in the city are doing. So thank you once again for your work on the survey. Can I thank Kieran and the team at Belfast City Council for continuing to work with Belfast Chamber to produce the Belfast Business Survey. Thanks, Kieran, for all your support in that. Can I thank everybody for attending this morning, and I reiterate Kieran's point from earlier, thank you as well for taking part in the survey. The survey would not exist if it wasn't for the people who were taking part. So thank you to those of you who have done that. So thank you all again just for turning up this morning, and it's great to be able to produce another Belfast Chamber event. Kieran, sorry, I was just about to close. Do you want to say a word?
Yeah, I was just going to say, just a reminder that we're going to have a summary of the survey up on the website over the next couple of hours. So if people want to, get a copy of it's an infographic summary report that's going to be available on the Chamber site.
I have checked, and it's just there now, so people can go to belfastchamber.com and download the summary report. It's sitting ready and available, and that has also then, just to remind everybody, reminded me to remind everybody that if you want to hear a little bit more about the economy of the city and delve deeper into some of those issues that are affecting the city's economy, like energy, like inflation, like interest rates, Belfast Chamber is working with partnering with Deloitte to run the first ever Belfast Chamber Economic Forum. That's happening on Friday the 18th, in the morning of Friday the 18th of November in W5 in the city. So if you haven't ordered for that, please go to our website and you can secure your ticket there for what I hope will be an interesting and timely opportunity hear a little bit more about what's happening. So thank you all once again. Thank you, David and Kirsty, and thanks, Kieran, and thanks everybody for attending. Look forward to seeing you all again very soon. Thank you.